Welcome to an excerpt from Jihad and the West, Black Flag over Babylon by Mark Silinsky, and a foreword by Sebastian Gorka. Indiana University Press published it in Bloomington and Indianapolis. This reading is presented by Kensington Security Consulting, which brings education to national security. This excerpt comes from Chapter 1 and explores the birth of the caliphate. A caliphate is born. There are different explanations for the caliphate's creation. One view holds that Western intervention in the Middle East, particularly that of the United States, is the key driver of the state's existence. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair submitted that the Anglo-American invasion of Iraq in 2003 helped give rise to the Islamic State. In the presidential election year of 2015 to 2016, politicians blamed one another. Some isolationist Republicans blamed the more interventionist Republicans, whom they called neoconservatives. Democrats accused Republicans for invading Iraq, and Republicans countered that Iraq was largely stable when President Bush left office. They argued that the chaos and blood swamps came on President Obama's watch. A PBS documentary titled The Secret History of ISIS. False, both Democrats and Republicans. The Arab media, as well as left-of-center journals of opinion, blame generalized American meddling. Another view holds that Islam, and not the West, is largely responsible for the birth of the state. The caliphate's leaders claim that divine providence guided them to build an Islamic state. The state's propagandists underscore this theme in all of their publications. There are other unconventional explanations for the state's creation, including climate change and Zionism. Secretary of State John Kerry linked the caliphate's success to Israeli policy toward the Palestinians. Others who scold the United States include long-standing enemies of successive presidential administrations. For example, Cuban ex-president Fidel Castro placed Israel's Mossad intelligence agency behind the radical Islamic State. In Holland, a Ministry of Justice and Security official declared that the Islamic Caliphate is a preconceived idea from Zionists deliberately to make Islam look bad. Blood antiques and killing pits. The origins of the Caliphate continue to be debated, but few observers can deny the state's commitment to erasing the region's non-Islamic past and present. Mesopotamian history is for sale as blood antiques. The plunder includes ancient coins, gold chains, figurines, and other Byzantine treasures, which are sold to European dealers. The state hires diggers to scour the earth for archaeological items and sells them via a network of brokers and other intermediaries. Looters receive 20 to 50% of the profit from any item they sell. Prospectors in the state's soil sometimes find gold and jewelry. Sometimes they find statuary. But sometimes diggers find decomposing victims of the caliphate. This is what happened when a mass grave was unearthed in October 2015. The Al-Shaitat tribe had rebelled against the caliphate in late summer 2015. In response, nearly 1,000 were killed and tossed into mass graves. Animals unearth the corpses to feed on the decaying flesh. Today, the caliphate destroys gems of decayed empires simply because they exist. A critic moaned, "They even ruin the ruins." Nobel laureate V.S. Naipaul wrote of this in Among the Believers. "The time before Islam is a time of blackness. That is part of Muslim theology. History has to serve theology." A leading scholar at Johns Hopkins University cited the caliphate's destruction as the worst since that of the Byzantine iconoclasts. in the 8th and 9th centuries. 69 today, there is no room for aesthetic beauty that is unconnected to Islam. The Caliphate made no room for Palmyra, which is the subject of the profile below. Profile 1. The lion, the poet, and the scholar. Once a prosperous city, at the crossroads of the Roman and Parthian empires, Palmyra is now gone. The city was once a cultural potpourri of architectural styles, mostly Roman, and a stopping place for caravans traveling from Rome to the Euphrates. It sprang to life as a trading hub in the 1st and 2nd centuries CE and flourished with cultural dynamism. The many languages, Greek, Roman, Parthian, and religions, food dishes, and musical instruments fused to give Palmyra, in the words of the Roman Pliny the Elder, its own fate. After the 5th century, Palmyra became home to many Christians. It was rich in houses of worship, some lost to the earth over the centuries, but some resurrected by Western archaeologists. Thousands of amateur archaeologists traveled to the once thriving desert outpost, once called the Bride of the Desert. Emperor Hadrian visited the town around 129 CE, and a queen warrior, Zenobia, held Palmyra in her grip in the mid-3rd century CE. Palmyra's austere beauty was faded in verse by Percy Bysshe Shelley's good friend, Thomas Love Peacock. In Palmyra, 1806, he wrote of its spirit of the days of yore. What countless charms around her rise, what dazzling splendor sparkles in her eyes, on her radiant brow enshrined. 74, Britain's youngest ever prime minister, visited the city in 1813. Later, Jane Elizabeth Digby, Lady Ellenborough, traveled to Palmyra from Damascus in 1853 to visit the home of an ancient fellow aristocrat, the strong-willed Queen Zenobia, who had ruled the city 1,700 years earlier. Lady Jane's tombstone was carved from stone quarried from Palmyra. There is also an Islamic heritage in Palmyra, which was once adorned with shrines. But the Islamic State will not tolerate a shrine, condemning it as a landmark of polytheism. The lion, Allata. Palmyra's temples, some of which would become churches, theaters, and beautifully designed graves, decayed over the centuries. One temple was renovated and enlarged by the Roman Emperor Hadrian in about 130 CE. In the 20th century, Western archaeologists unearthed lost civilizations in the area. A Syrian-Polish archaeological mission uncovered statues of mythical animals, winged goats, and lions. Particularly treasured was the 4-meter-tall Lion of Al-Lat sculpture. This pre-Christian lion dates from the 1st century CE and was dedicated to the pre-Islamic Arabian goddess Al-Lata. But the Caliphate had no use for the lion or anything else deemed un-Islamic. The state blew the statue to pieces and crushed the remnants. It is unlikely that it can ever be restored. A Palmyra resident recalled, "I heard a loud noise, so I went up to the roof to see what is going on. I saw Daesh crushing the God Lion statue with construction machines. Throughout the day, they plowed into dust the fragments of the wealthy caravan oasis that had once teemed with entrepreneurship and shone with architectural pride. There was more to come. The killing started in the afternoon. In the Roman amphitheater, where long-lost plays on countless themes were performed in many languages, spectators sat on the stone seats and watched an entirely new performance. 25 captured soldiers were shot on stage in front of an audience of several hundred. The poet. Palmyra has produced celebrated men of letters one of whom was Omar al-Farah. Born in 1949, he started writing about village life in Syria at age 13. His poems sang his love for his country, and his breakout poem was titled Hamda. It was about a young Bedouin woman who killed herself rather than submit to an arranged marriage. Other poems shone with optimism, particularly on themes of personal and national independence. His upbeat prose gave way to laments as he witnessed his people suffer, particularly under the caliphate. His son explained, "The destruction of Syria wore him down." Omar al-Farah died in June 2015, in the same week, perhaps the same day, that the caliphate rigged Palmyra's architectural treasures with explosives and obliterated them. The poet's death came unexpectedly, and his surprised son remarked that he had looked to be in good shape. Palmyra's poet was mourned by his compatriots, the scholar. In the whole history of Syria, we haven't witnessed anything like this. They are like wolves after blood. Walid al-Assad, son of Khaled al-Assad. Khaled al-Assad, Mr. Palmyra, a beloved 82-year-old antiquities scholar, devoted his life to exploring, saving, and studying the town's treasures. Holding degrees from Damascus University, he named his daughter Zenobia after the warrior queen of Palmyra's folklore. He directed the Antiquities and Museums Department's archaeological site for 40 years and then retired to read, write, excavate, and educate the world about Palmyra. The caliphate knew about him, and they beat and tortured the old man. Held for 25 days, he could not speak to or see his family, but there is no evidence that he betrayed a single artifact. The Vandals demanded gold, but there was no bullion he could offer. As his son, Muhammad, said, there was nothing to tell them. The gold in Palmyra is in the statues and the architecture. The scholar could have escaped earlier, even after the caliphate had conquered Palmyra. With his celebrity and prestige, he could have taken refuge in the West and lived near a prestigious university. But he told a fellow scholar, "I am from Palmyra, and I will stay here even if they kill me." And they did. Trundled into a van, he was tossed into the town's main square. He was not dressed in an orange jumpsuit. He wore his ordinary clothes. Caliphate leaders read charges against him, and the town's greatest antiquities scholar was branded a director of idols. Further, he represented Syrian scholars at international infidel conferences. Finding him guilty, they beheaded him. After that, they strung what remained of his corpse to an ancient Roman column. Palmyra mourned. Palmyra tomorrow. There is still life in Palmyra. Its territory is contested and jostled between pro-government and caliphate forces. In March 2016, the caliphate was expelled. 1 month later, Russia's Mariinsky Theater Orchestra traveled to Palmyra and played works by Bach and Prokofiev in the amphitheater that the state had used to kill its enemies. The conductor declared that it was a concert against barbarism, and a Russian visitor paid tribute to the life of Khaled al-Assad. Nonetheless, an Islamic State spokesperson reveled in the devastation they had left. "We captured a whole town and houses from them, and they recaptured sand and destruction." He was partially correct. But today, Palmyra is more than sand and ruin. Omar al-Farah's warm poems and elegiac verse will likely be recited for years, albeit in hushed tones. They will remind Palmyra's future generations of a sweeter, if bygone, life in Syria. The books of Palmyra's bard, Khaled al-Assad, will be read by lovers of history, art, and Syria. True, The proud lion of Palmyra has been turned to dust, but it is not entirely lost. Its bold visage endures in photographs, and it will live in memory. In the world of Islam. In the Islamic world, some nationalities support the caliphate, its agenda, philosophy, and tactics, and others do not. In Pakistan, less than 1/3 of the population holds negative views of the caliphate. This is particularly alarming to some observers, given the ever-growing nuclear arsenal of the South Asian country. Other states that have sizable support for the Islamic State are Nigeria, in which 20% of its Muslim population supports it, and Malaysia, in which 12% of Muslims support the state. Though the proportion of Muslim populations is often small, the combined number of Muslims who support the caliphate is troubling. A Pew poll in 2015 revealed that for 11 nation-states with significant Muslim populations, there are between 63 and 287 million persons who either support the caliphate or are ambivalent. Summary: a cradle of empires and a repository of religious monuments, Mesopotamia has enduring ties to the West. A succession of empires has risen and fallen there, and one Islamic civilization became world-renowned for science as well as piety. Europeans have engaged Muslims as both enemies and allies at different times and in different places. The balance of power in that part of the Middle East has shifted several times and in many ways. But today's caliphate is a unique challenge to Western interests, power, and prestige. In 2003, Saddam Hussein warned that the West would open the gates of hell if he were removed. He was removed, and the gates flung wide open for the Islamic State. The caliphate is devastating the treasures of ancient civilizations in Iraq and Syria that had survived for millennia. In summer 2016, it dynamited the 2,500-year-old temple of Nabu in Iraq. 1 week later, it boasted that it would soon destroy the pyramids of Egypt. As for today, the state is struggling to hold its Mesopotamian ground while infiltrating its cadre into Europe and throughout the West. This and more is the subject of Chapter 2. This concludes a reading from Jihad and the West, Black Flag Over Babylon, by Mark Silinsky, with a foreword by Sebastian Gorka. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and pressing the like button. It is available for purchase online. Nothing in this reading or any other reading in Jihad and the West represents the official position of any person or agency of the United States government. On behalf of Kensington Security Consulting, thank you for listening.